Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Saturday, 17th May 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is making significant strides in technological innovation and global economic expansion. The country is heavily investing in AI-driven humanoid robots with the goal of revolutionizing its manufacturing sector. Ori Capital is launching a substantial US $350 million fund, specifically targeting Chinese biotech firms, anticipating that AI will drive market outperformance. Despite ongoing trade friction, China continues to highlight its achievements in poverty reduction. Container spot rates are rising as trade between the US and China strengthens, with rates from Shanghai to the US West Coast increasing by 31% week over week. Cambodia has commenced exporting durians to China, seeking to compete with established players like Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Minfu Group is expanding its reach in the global smart cleaning sector with the Yueli China tour. However, the Chinese property market remains sluggish, and Citi is cutting up to 200 tech contractor roles in China. Chinese stock markets have shown volatility as initial enthusiasm regarding relaxed US-China trade relations fades. Hong Kong's financial revitalization is also a priority, led by former Goldman Sachs executive. Easing trade tensions between the United States and China, alongside the Biden administration's adjustment to chip export regulations, has boosted companies like Nvidia and Tesla. The S&P 500 saw its fifth straight day of gains, climbing 5% for the week, buoyed by improved US-China trade relations. Yet, shipping companies remain cautious despite any trade agreements. The earlier 145% tariff on Chinese goods, though temporary, has had lasting economic consequences. Nvidia is navigating a competitive landscape in China, where Huawei is emerging as a strong competitor. Nvidia has clarified that it is not sharing GPU designs with China, following reports of a new Shanghai R&D center, and that there is no evidence of AI chip diversion into China. Nvidia intends to expand its presence in China with a research center, even as export restrictions affect its operations. The White House is currently assessing Apple's potential collaboration with Alibaba to integrate AI into iPhones sold in China. Former President Trump has indicated his openness to meeting with Xi Jinping in China. Globally, Vedanta, Hindalco, and Nalco have seen their share prices jump by 413% due to the US-China trade discussions. But there's still some uncertainty about base metal prices. Saudi Arabia is significantly expanding its technological and economic influence through strategic initiatives. The Public Investment Fund, PIF, is actively engaged in global finance, warning against impersonation attempts seeking fraudulent money transfers. PIF boosted its holdings in companies like B and Amazon, while exiting LTP Humanwide trade. PIF is also partnering with I2 Capital to launch a dedicated Middle East infrastructure fund. The kingdom is making strides in artificial intelligence, with plans to increase its investments to $1 trillion, according to Donald Trump, and the launch of Humane to spearhead global AI development. These moves are reflected in Saudi Arabia's acquisition of AI chips. Jensen Huang's net worth increased significantly after Trump promoted the Saudi chip deal. The central bank is adopting a Bitcoin strategy, reflecting a broader interest in cryptocurrency. In other sectors, MP Materials and Ma'aden have signed a MOU to jointly develop a rare earth supply chain. Bridgewater's billionaire founder, Ray Dalio, plans to open an office in Saudi Arabia. However, a Bank of America analyst was sentenced to 10 years in prison over a years-old tweet. In entertainment and sports, There are reports that the owners of UFC and WHAM are close to a deal with Saudi Arabia to create a new boxing league, with TKO reporting $2.80 billion in revenue for 2024. Huddle 2025, a global event, announced its 31st edition will be held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. United Kingdom. The United Kingdom now holds the second largest amount of US Treasuries, surpassing China. The FTSE 100 showed little movement as investors weighed various earnings reports and economic indicators. Santander UK named Sir Thomas Scholar as its new chair. The UK is also changing regulations to give the London Metal Exchange, LN, more control over position limit. North Macedonia and the UK have formed a £5 billion investment partnership. Foreign Minister David Lammy announced that the UK is working with the US to try and secure a lasting ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Ukraine, Russia, WHAM. Peace talks between Ukraine and Russia continue to be unstable, with Russia casting doubt on Kyiv's power and stressing the need for the original signatory to endorse any peace deal. The United States believes a major breakthrough in peace talks is improbable, especially since neither Putin nor Zelenskyy participated in the discussions held in Turkey. According to one source, Russia allegedly threatened Ukraine with eternal war during a recent 2-hour discussion. Despite the ongoing conflict, an agreement was reached for the exchange of 2,000 prisoners. Donald Trump expressed his desire to meet with Putin shortly, as Kremlin officials engage in talks with Kyiv. India witnessed a substantial inflow of $8,831 crore into its equities from foreign portfolio investors, FPIs, marking the largest single-day investment since March. This surge was partially fueled by hopes of tariff reductions following Donald Trump's comments, which suggested India offered tariff cuts, though Trump downplayed any immediate need. Concurrently, gold prices on India's MEX index decreased by 0.74%, a fall of Yuan 689 per 10 grams, as tariff tensions seemed to ease from their April 2025 peak. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, continues to actively build up its gold reserves. In the banking sector, SBI Bank India and ICICI Prudential Life Insurance forged a bancassurance alliance. Meanwhile, Ceasefire Hava Servisi of Turkey is contemplating legal action after its agreements in India were terminated. Stock analysts recommend purchasing shares of Indian Railway Finance Corporation, IRFC, SJVN, and NBCC. India.tv calls are growing for India to create a community decarbonization fund and to simplify its defense export procedures to increase defense export. South Korea's political landscape is shifting as former President Yoon Suk-yeol departs from the People Power Party. This occurs as the PPPP candidate trails Lee Jae-myung, the Democratic Party DP frontrunner in polls. Lee is focusing his campaign on a liberal stronghold, while the PPP's Kim is targeting battleground region. Economically, South Korea is under pressure to finalize a tariff agreement, with the U.S. discussions regarding this issue occurred between Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, nations, and U.S. trade. Representative Jamieson Greer in South Korea. A South Korean steelmaker is planning to invest in Hyundai's Louisiana mill. Canfor Next is also advocating for South Korea to explore nuclear energy ventures in Europe. Turning to Thailand, KT is introducing AI large language models to the country. Meanwhile, South Korea is attracting Qatari tourists and other global travelers as a growing luxury and wellness travel destination. The ongoing challenges with Google Maps in South Korea continue to be a point of discussion, though they may not be directly related to national security. In cultural news, a calligraphy work by a South Korean historical figure has achieved record-breaking prices at auction. United States grapples with the fallout from Moody's credit rating downgrade, mirroring concerns from other agencies about the nation's mounting debt. Cable companies Charter and Cox are attempting a significant consolidation, proposing a $34.50 billion merger intended to bolster their competitive edge in the telecommunications market. Though regulatory approval remains uncertain, the US faces hurdles in strengthening trade ties with Britain, where consumer apprehension regarding American meat products has resulted in less than 2% of British food imports coming from the United States, complicating ongoing trade agreement negotiations. Turning to the United Arab Emirates, the nation is strategically increasing its investment and influence in Africa. This expansion occurs as other major global players like the United States scale back their presence on the continent. The United States recently faced a setback as Moody's downgraded its credit rating by one notch, moving it from AA to A1. This decision reflects concerns about the nation's increasing debt burden and skepticism regarding existing fiscal policy's effectiveness in curbing deficits. Despite this, a temporary US-China trade truce offers a moment of stability, though underlying trade tensions remain a concern. Turning to Eastern Europe, Russia and Ukraine engaged in direct peace talks for the first time in 3 years, signaling a potential shift in diplomatic efforts. Simultaneously, former US President Trump declared his plans to engage with Presidents Putin and Zelenskyy, as well as NATO members, aiming to facilitate a ceasefire and promote trade. This announcement comes after Putin's absence from peace talks between Russia and Ukraine and Turkey, increasing anticipation in Europe about Trump's potential role in the conflict. Meanwhile, Hong Kong may experience economic gains as mainland Chinese companies face growing pressure to delist from US stock exchanges. This shift could lead to a significant influx of listings and capital into Hong Kong's financial markets. Australia's financial sector is seeing activity, with the Australian Securities Exchange, ASX, considering job cuts and consulting on the matter. Australia is also implementing a mandatory merger control regime. This will particularly affect private equity and foreign investment deals. In financial news, Gina Rinehart, Australia's wealthiest individual, has moved billions into US equities, including Berkshire Hathaway. Recent economic indicators suggest Australia has made progress against inflation. Turning to personal finance in Australia, experts advise carefully scrutinizing the terms of life insurance policies. Several exchange-traded funds, ETFs, listed on the ASX are being touted as potentially strong long-term investments. Efforts to address the housing shortage in Australia, including a project involving Bunnings, seem to have stalled. Despite a generally positive market trend, some shares within the ASX 200 index are still viewed as undervalued. The average yearly earnings for truck drivers in Perth, Australia, have also been noted, particularly in connection with Sitrack. South Africa is grappling with a substantial $4.10 billion budget deficit, requiring immediate fiscal attention. The South African rand has seen a boost, trading near a 5-month high, driven by positive sentiment regarding a possible new inflation strategy. In corporate developments, Exxaro Resources is poised to acquire manganese assets in a deal valued at $11.67 billion, while Tiger Brands has divested its canned fruit business for a nominal R1. Qantas has begun offering direct international flights to South Africa, signaling increased connectivity. Honor is actively expanding its market presence within the country. Furthermore, an Air Zimbabwe flight to Johannesburg, carrying only a single passenger, has prompted questions about the airline's financial sustainability and operational efficiency. Japan's economy faced headwinds as it contracted in the first quarter, showing an annualized real GDP decrease of 0.7%, triggered by flagging consumption and exports, raising concerns about a possible recession. The nation's markets saw record foreign purchases of equities and bonds in April, an event viewed cautiously by analysts who suggest it might be temporary. Japan also sees changing corporate strategies, including Nissan's plans to potentially close car assembly plants in Japan and Mexico. The United Arab Emirates is set to benefit from a $4 billion investment in Oklahoma, where state officials have approved a deal with a private UAE company to construct an aluminum manufacturing facility. The UAE is also gaining traction in the tech sector, with major players like NVIDIA, Cisco, Oracle, and OpenAI backing its Stargate data center initiative. Adding to the nation's diplomatic engagements, former U.S. President Donald Trump chose the United Arab Emirates as one of his destinations during his first state visit abroad in his second term, alongside a stop in Saudi Arabia. Canada's S&P TSX Composite Index edged higher, closing up 0.29% and hitting a record high. This marked the sixth consecutive weekly gain, fueled by optimism surrounding international trade. Investment analysts suggest focusing on particular stocks within the TSX, highlighting Air Canada and companies in the energy sector as potentially lucrative options. Brazil witnessed a considerable environmental impact in 2024. Although deforestation decreased by 32%, the nation still lost over 3 million acres of vegetation. In corporate news, the board of Brazil's Gold proposed a capital increase. Further, the trend of corporate Bitcoin accumulation is expanding into Brazil, suggesting a growing embrace of digital assets. Turning to the United States, Wall Street demonstrated resilience. News concerning Coinbase did not significantly affect the market, and the stock showed signs of recovery. Syria is set to shift its currency printing operations to the United Arab Emirates and Germany. This move ends Russia's prior involvement in producing Syrian currency. Following the settlement of $15.50 million in arrears by Gulf states, the World Bank has declared Syria eligible for new loans. Canadian tourism to the U.S. continues its downward trend, marking the third consecutive month of significant decline, fueled by an ongoing Canadian boycott linked to tariff concerns and policy disagreements. In Asia, stock markets presented a mixed picture following a Wall Street upswing, with Asian currencies potentially charting divergent paths after a recent rally. Shanghai stock saw a rise of 0.8%, boosted by tech sector gains and optimism surrounding potential trade resolutions. Master Beef, an Asian restaurant chain, successfully raised an additional $620,000 through its IPO over allotment, funds intended to fuel expansion throughout Southeast Asia. France's highway system, largely operated by private entities, remains under scrutiny due to persistently high tolls, sparking debate over whether it truly serves the public interest. Amidst international discussions, the Trump administration is reportedly considering a plan to relocate 1 million Palestinians to Libya, although specific details and agreements with Libyan leadership remain vague. Discussions are also taking place that compare stock tickers in Mumbai and Shenzhen's performance against Pakistan's economic claims, further highlighting disparities between India's economic vitality and Pakistan's overall economy. Meanwhile, Turkey's Celebi says it's cooperating after India revoked clearance. A historic Vietnam photograph has had its attribution suspended by a photo group due to emerging doubts about its authenticity, adding another layer to an already sensitive topic. In Italy, Thea Duncan Prendo, founder of Doing Italy, resides in Milan, paying $1,850 per month for her 3-bedroom home. Colombia has officially applied to join a China-based development bank, signaling a potential shift in Latin American alliances away from traditional ties with Washington. Sweden stands out as a positive force in European capital markets, fostering innovation that benefits both its own economy and U.S. national defense interests. Poland's upcoming presidential election places Tusk's reform agenda at a critical juncture, as the nation also asserts its position in the evolving space race. Across Europe, stock markets defied volatility to close their fifth consecutive week of gains, while a trio of pivotal elections looms on the horizon. Samsung has agreed to acquire Germany's FECT Group for €50 billion. Georgia's economy minister actively promoted the country's investment opportunities at a recent forum in London. Meanwhile, Israel has escalated its actions in Gaza, even as progress is reported in ongoing hostage negotiation. Singapore is investing heavily in the future of air, travel infrastructure, and technologies. Russia is pursuing a long-term strategy. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.